Yo, what's up guys? In this week's video, I'm going to be recreating the Burrow from Harry Potter. This was my all-time favorite book and movie series as a kid, and still holds a special place in my heart. Now, I could pay $145 for the Department 56 one on Amazon, or use maybe $40 in materials, and 40 plus hours of work over the last 2 weeks to make my own. So, let's take these materials and get started. To start this build, I'm going to make a rough shell of the building that I can then add windows, doors, and other details to. For the shell, I used balsa wood sheets. Now, I didn't wing it. I did use a reference photo from the one you can buy off of Amazon for the build, just because I'm not that talented.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Cut the sheets into walls and superglued them together. Normally I'll build to a certain scale, but for this diorama I just winged it on the size, but still kept it pretty close to like a tabletop game figure size. Once the walls were glued together, I glued on some more balsa wood sheets to the top, just to add some more support and structure to the build. After I put those on, I flipped it over and trimmed off the excess. I like to do this because you don't have to measure out any weird angles, and it just makes your life way easier. While I build the rest of the shell, I just want to kind of go over why I've been MIA for the last few weeks. The first reason is mostly because I've put an insane amount of time and effort into making this build perfect, specifically about 45 hours over the last 2 weeks. I've also been working more than usual because me and my wife are trying to buy a house, and I really want to save up some extra money to build a really nice gaming and crafting room, which I'll be making a video of when the time comes, and I'm really excited about that. The last excuse is that I went to a music festival this last weekend. It's fun working on the dioramas, and I really love making these YouTube videos, but it's also nice to get out and have some fun with family and friends every once in a while. That being said, it's time to get back to the grind and make some more videos. I have some really fun projects planned that I can't wait to get done and posted, but until then we'll finish up here. I made some shells for the windows off camera that I'll glue on now. I know this looks like shit now, but I'm going to start adding some real detail after, and it'll really start bringing this together. I jerry-rigged up this setup from some bamboo sticks to help trim the balsa wood strips into slightly thinner balsa wood strips. That I'll use to make bricks, and I'll add some window trim to the windows. After I trimmed them up, I cut the strips into smaller pieces just to act as the bricks. I'm using super glue to glue on the bricks. This process is super simple, just time consuming. I'm only going to do the bricks in select areas because most of the rest of the burrow will be made of wood slats, except for the first floor, but we'll get to that later on. I trimmed off the excess, then we'll just repeat that process here and here. Next I'm going to add the chimney. I used 1/2 inch XPS foam, but before I glue it on I painted it black because super glue does melt the foam, so I got to be careful there. After gluing it into place, I realized the chimney didn't line up very well, but they're wizards, so whatever, I guess.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Next, I'll glue on the wood slats. This is pretty much the same process as the bricks, except I use coffee stirring sticks. Slap them on, trim off the excess, bada bing, bada boom, and we're done. I did that to the other walls, and now we can move on to making the roof. I'm using cardstock for the base of the roof, doing one section at a time and working my way around, gluing each piece on as I go. I also cut out a little piece to fit this last window into place, and I have some other stuff to do before we finish up and add the shingles, so I'll bust that out and we can get back to the roof later. Next, I'm going to do the trim on the first floor. This is going to be more like wood slats with stucco. The process overall is pretty simple. I just line up the long piece and kind of trim it to fit. I like doing this just to avoid measuring and keep the flow going. For the door, I used coffee stirring sticks and made a little window. Then I'll just do the same thing for the sides and the back. And after, I'll start doing the window trim with the aforementioned balsa wood strips. I'll show the process for this first window, and then we'll just do the rest off camera because this video is starting to get long and boring. also finish up the top roof parts off camera. And then I went ahead and glued on some support slats to the bottom here. Then I'll glue on some supports from the roof to the third story. The triangle bits where the roof meets the top of the walls looked a little bit plain, so I just added some trim to those bits as well. The shingles are really simple as well, but as with everything I do, it takes an insane amount of time. I started with a slightly thinner cardstock than I used for the base of the roof. I cut it into strips, then cut slits into the strips. Since the Burrow is basically a slapped together house held up by magic, I wanted the shingles to look not so uniform, so the slits are very random. Then I bit them up a bit just to add some depth. Once I did that a billion times, I glued the shingles onto the base of the roof. Next, I'm going to add a little third floor deck. I used some small balsa strips to make the outline, then used some balsa sheets for the floor and the roof. Then I just glued it into place. And honestly, I was too lazy to add a door, but I figured they could just apparate out there because, you know, they're wizards and shit. Now let's add some detail to the chimney. I'll start by putting some trim pieces onto the top, then take a pin and carve some detail on the sides. I use paint to cover the exposed foam, so when I spray paint the model to base coat it, the foam doesn't melt away on me. Then I just finished up with some chimney stacks, which are just some random pieces of plastic. Next I'll add some ridge cap shingles, a term I most definitely just looked up for the video. Then we can take the build outside, prime it black, and get ready for painting. Painting buildings is my favorite because it's way easier than painting miniatures. I'll start on the roof with the red airbrush paint. I like to use airbrush paint because it's thinner than normal paint and let some of the black base bleed through. I hit the chimney with the brick red, then dry brush with a slightly less red, then dry brush with an off-white. I was thinking about adding some lights, but honestly time got away from me on this build, so I'm just going to paint it like the house is lit up. Wizards do use a lot of candles, so to simulate that warm light, I did an orange on the edges and wet blended a yellow into the center. Next, I'll do the bricks with the same brick red I used before. Then I'm going to paint random bricks with a yellow, an orange, dark red, and a dark brown to add some color variation. Lastly, I hit the whole thing with the brown wash, followed up with the black wash. Now I'm going to paint the stucco parts with an off-white, then slap on a brown wash before it dries. Then I took a paper towel and dabbed away the excess. The wood is the easiest to paint, but also the hardest because it's basically the last step and I can't get the paint on any of the other stuff that's already painted. But I'll start with a dark brown, then dry brush on a slightly less brown, then an off-white. Lastly, I painted this roof black, dry brush with a medium gray, then I just hit some streaks with a light gray. And that's the building done. Now for the base, I cut a piece of XPS foam off camera. Go ahead and prime it black so when I super glue the building to the base, it doesn't melt the foam. Next, I'm going to slap on a terrain paste. Any paste will do because I'm going to paint over this later on. After that, I'm going to put on some plaster rocks. I just blended it in with some more terrain paste. Then I'll sprinkle on some smaller rocks and some sand here to act as a path to the door. For the path, I used a little isopropyl alcohol and watered down PVA glue. This will help hold the whole thing into place. Once it's fully dried, I'll paint it with a dark brown, medium brown, and a black, wet blending the colors into each other for a smooth color transition. Then I did a brown wash over the whole thing, and honestly I regret this because it kind of covered the base colors and just looks like a single brown tone, so maybe I'll skip that step next time. Next I painted the rocks with a medium gray, light gray, and a blue gray. Then I dry brushed with an off-white and followed up with a black wash. Then we can fill a dead space with some shrubs and grass tufts. While I do that, I want to say thank you so much for watching, and if you liked the video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel a lot, and honestly I just really like seeing the engagement. It's really cool to see. Anyway, lastly I'll paint the sides with the black 4.0, and that's another diorama down. Now let's roll the beauties. Peace, y'all.